Now, I'm reading the press today, and I noticed an article claiming that a journalist was allowed to bully Zelensky. Bully, right? Like it's in high school. Like these are some children saying mean words to one another, and someone's feelings got hurt. Now the individual is going to have emotional trauma. When he goes to bed that night, he's going to review the conversation, and it's going to cause him pain and anguish. And the question is like, why did Trump allow this to happen, right? Like Trump is like a god there, like he's like the entity that gets to decide who speaks and what. And this entity was malevolent because he allowed evil to take root. He allowed a question. Now the interesting thing is like my understanding of how politics work is that you find a guy from a nation with tens of millions of people, like you find the guy capable of representing the interests of your nation. In other words, you're paying him tens of thousands of dollars and you're giving him all these perks and privileges because he knows how to speak. So a good statesman cannot by definition be bullied by a journalist. A good statesman is the one who bullies. Like, he is the one that would demolish the journalist with powerful rhetoric. He would manage to respond to the journalist and make the journalist wonder, why did he even ask that question? And so I think the article saying that Zelensky was bullied by a journalist to be disrespectful, because if that's the case, it's an attack on Zelensky. But let's see what actually happened, because I was genuinely curious. This is probably the third time that I'm watching this event, and I think like this is going to be the last video when I cover this. But it is very interesting, right? So let's see what exactly did this horrible journalist do to the Ukrainian president.
Second
And
question.
my second question for President Zelensky.
Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if do you own a suit?
Yeah, problems.
So the main question was, why does Trump allow? And my counter question is like, what was he supposed to do here? Like, defend Zelensky's fashion? Like, is this woman? Tell the journalist to stop slut-shaming him? Like, what exactly would you expect to happen? If I was Trump, of course I would let the guy defend himself, because otherwise it would be rude. Like, I would basically try to say that he's incapable of defending himself. Let me do it. And also, I genuinely think that Trump is also interested in this. It's like, yeah, why don't you wear a suit? He's wearing a suit. He's wearing a suit. This guy over here is wearing a suit. I'm pretty sure that the guy holding the camera is wearing a suit. Why aren't you wearing a suit? So let's hear the explanation.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not
Really?
respecting
I
the
don't have
dignity of this
such.
office.
I will wear a costume after this war will.
Take into account that English is his second language, so I'm not going to hold it against him. It's probably a little bit difficult to express himself in a foreign language the same way that you'd express yourself in your native tongue. So this is why he uses the word costume. This is probably why he's struggling to find words. So like, take that into account when assessing what he is saying.
Finish?
Okay.
Yes, maybe one.
Maybe something
maybe
like this.
something like
Yes,
yours.
sir.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Maybe something better. I don't know. We will see. Maybe something cheaper than. Yeah.
Right, so this is where he lost me, but this is the way that Eastern Europeans do politics, right? So like in the United States, you have Kamala Harris pulling fake accents, while in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, you have politicians with millions, sometimes billions of dollars in the bank, trying to LARP as being poor. So basically, this is what Zelensky is going with. Like, my country is in economic distress, I'm suffering financially, but in the future, after the war, I am not a very rich person, but I will buy a suit probably cheaper than yours, right? Like, that's the argument that I got from listening to the conversation. But what's interesting is a lot of people on the internet asking, like, why does it matter? Well, why does it matter if it has a suit? Like, who cares about the suit? Well, the reason it matters is that there are such a thing called customs, right? The reason we dress, it's kind of like trying to interact with the leftists to explain it. It's kind of like choosing a pronoun, right? Like, it's a very important thing in a person's life. It's like choosing a pronoun. It's like the way you want to present yourself to the world. And so now is not the time to be a moron and start deconstructing. You're not going to start to analyze the tradition and be like, oh, but why is it important? Why does it? Because it does, okay? Other people will judge you based on how you dress. And while they may not tell you in your face, their behavior is going to be affected. So, for instance, if you have a university exam and you go to the exam without wearing a suit, you may irritate the professor, which would make him less likely to ask you follow-up questions in order to see if you actually did study properly and try to help you out. May give you a slightly smaller grade because grades at the end of the day are subjective in many cases, right? Like he can ask you a question and your answer may be a 7, but he may be like, no, actually it's a 6. You know, this is reality. Oh my goodness, it's not fair. It's hard. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's not fair. It is horrible, yes. But it's reality. It's the world we live in. It's the same thing like if you were to go to a job interview without wearing a suit. Again, those things matter. Like the optics are important. This is why politicians have entire teams that are there to apply various makeup in order to hide the imperfections of their face. Like maybe he has a pimple, so like they're putting makeup to hide that pimple. Why they have people that are actually there to help them dress up and to make sure that they're presentable. Because these things matter. Like imagine if you see Donald Trump on TV and he's got like a little bit of mustard on his shirt, right? It's like, oh, but why does it matter? Why do we care? Because we do, right? Because other people do. Now, the interesting thing is to answer the question, why does Zelensky actually not wear a suit? Like, what is the real reason? Well, the real reason is optics. The real reason is that in any war throughout history, there are 2 battles going on. The first battle is actually on the battlefield with the soldiers and the guns. The second battle is in the newspapers. Every side will try to moralize its soldiers while demoralizing the enemy. Every side is going to try to say that victory is right around the corner, that the soldiers are going to be home by Christmas, that the enemy has suffered catastrophic losses, and they're going to ignore everything that's negative. The enemy does so as well. And by the way, this is why when the Red Army entered Berlin, people in Germany just didn't believe it. Like they thought it's fake news, they thought it's propaganda, because their newspapers would constantly hide things from them. And again, like this is normal. This is exactly how the way it's supposed to work. Because soldiers with morale fight better than those without. And there have been cases throughout human history where a well-equipped army has surrendered or fled a poorer-equipped army just because of morale. See Afghanistan, for instance. Or Syria today, right? Like if your soldiers don't have morale, they don't fight. And so like the battlefield is also in front of the cameras. So what exactly did Zelensky do? Now, I have said in the beginning that I have a lot of respect and admiration for Zelensky as a man. I know this may trigger some people, but the reason I do is that when the Russians invaded, he did not fled. It would have been very easy for him to just take his suitcases filled with body and flee to Switzerland, where he would have a happily ever after life. And every now and then he would go to a TV station or a radio show and talk about certain things as a politician in exile, try to rally up support for the people in Ukraine that are guerrilla fighting or whatever. And that would have been like a very profitable life to have, but like he didn't do that. He actually stood and fight. Now, for those of you who don't remember, when the Russians invaded Ukraine, everyone, not just the Russians, but even the West, were expecting that the entire battle will be done in like 2 weeks or so. Like they expected a very short confrontation similar to what happened in Crimea, that the Ukrainians are going to drop their weapons and they're going to surrender. But that didn't happen. What happened is that the Ukrainians actually managed to hold off the Russians for more than 2 weeks. And after that, the West started sending in help. And so when you have Zelensky going to the European Union to address the EU, what he did was to wear a shirt. Because the image was like, okay, it's almost like he's coming from the front lines. It's like for the last couple of weeks, he has been inside the bunker, working tirelessly day and night, commanding the troops, issuing orders, managing to stave off one of the most powerful militaries on earth with his smaller force. And while Kiev is being bombed, he managed to find a way to go to the West, ask people for help, ask politicians for help, and he didn't even have time to change. Like, he's still wearing the shirt because he's from the front lines, he's from the command center. And probably after the meeting, he's going to go right back into talking to his generals and into issuing orders, right? That was the image that was being portrayed, and that was extremely powerful. Again, nobody expected that Russia, one of the strongest militaries on earth, would have problems with fighting in Ukraine. Like, no one at the time would have even considered that the Ukrainians would be able to last for more than a couple of weeks. And so, like, that was a very powerful image. It basically, like, destroys the perception. It's like, well, maybe Russia isn't such a strong military. Maybe they aren't that powerful. If this guy, while Kiev is under bombardment, can just go to the West, go back, he's managing to hold off the enemy forces. And so that's why he was wearing a shirt. But as time goes on, and you realize that the front line isn't in Kiev anymore, the Ukrainian people are receiving aid from the West, and they are managing to turn this into a stalemate between the Russian and Ukraine, public perception is changing. And so the image that he is coming from the front lines isn't as strong as the image if he actually did wear a suit. In fact, this would have been a very powerful optics moment if he did wear a suit. Why? Well, because every single time he appeared after the start of the war, he did not wear a suit. So if he would have worn a suit at this meeting, it would symbolize that he is so confident that this agreement is going to benefit towards ending the war that he is finally wearing a suit. He is finally looking at the future where there is no more war, where there is peace. And the Americans are bringing that stability through the symbolic act of signing this contract. That would have been a lot more impactful. And so this is, why the journalist was asking him, like, why aren't you wearing a suit? It's because it's a piece of propaganda that, like, again, it works in a specific context at a specific time. But after that, it gets a little bit stale. Like, for instance, when Donald Trump was appearing with the big bandage around his ear, that was also a piece of propaganda. Whether he needed the bandage or not is irrelevant. Like, if I was him, I would definitely use the bandage even if I didn't need it. It's to show the world that he survived an assassination attempt, right? So, like, the bigger the bandage, the better. But imagine if Donald Trump was to wear a bandage even today. Like, all of that purpose, all of the imagery associated with that would become cringe. It's basically past, it's a different context now. It's past the time. You need to change it up a little bit. And so, yeah, this is my take. And also some people said, well, it's because he wants to be relatable. Now, it's true, in Eastern Europe, a lot of politicians try to look relatable, but this isn't relatable. Again, every single person in this picture is wearing a suit. If you were invited to the White House, you would wear a suit. The common man wears a suit when attending an event of great importance. And claiming that you don't have money isn't actually a good reason. For instance, when I was at law school, I also saw a lot of trials, and I went to the courthouse, and I saw a lot of people. Even the most poor individuals, even the beggars, would come in front of the judge wearing a suit. And no, before you even think about suggesting, in my country, you don't get a suit for free. I know there's other places on earth where if you're going to court and you can't afford the suit, they will give you one. No, like, my country is not like that. Most people would do their best in order to be able to afford a suit. Now, if they generally don't have money, they can rent one. If they even don't have money to rent one, they will borrow one from a friend. If they don't have friends and they don't have money, then they will go to the graveyard and dig a corpse and use that suit. There has not been a single case that I can think of where someone went to court without wearing a suit. And so this is not what a relatable means. Like, any relatable person, if you are invited by Zelensky himself to go to the Ukrainian palace or whatever the house where the presidency lies, you would wear a suit. And so it's actually relatable to wear a suit at these occasions. Not wearing a suit invites these types of questions, which, again, it's not a big deal, but you saw what the White House administration said. It was the body language that ticked them off, right? So it's like small things. A lot of the language that are happening between people is non-spoken. around 70% or 80% of our language is actually not spoken. It's about body language, tone of voice, the way you dress, the way you present yourself. Like, all these things are important and they matter. And I'm pretty sure, like, this is obvious, right? Like, everyone knows that they matter, but they just want to have internet arguments and pretend that all of a sudden they just don't get it. They just don't understand why the journalist would ask something like this. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.